On one rainy winter night, Adele sat on his rocking chair, holding an old photo between his trembling fingers. His eyes betrayed him every time he looked at it, and his heart felt like a torn piece of paper burning like coal. The weight of grief pressed down on his mind, suffocating him like a tight rope wrapped around his throat. His breath came out in heated bursts, as if his chest was on fire from within. In the photo, Noor was smiling as if she owned the whole world, unaware that fate was watching her from behind, like a wolf waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Everything in the house reminded him of her little doll, still lying on the couch, the one she used to jump with joy over whenever she played with. It was the same doll he had gifted her on her 7th birthday as a reward for passing her exams. Her sketchbook, filled with smiling faces, held within its pages the faces of her family. Every time she finished a drawing, she would rush to him, excitedly to show it, writing underneath, "When I grow up, I will make you the happiest person on earth. I will make up for Mom's absence and build you a palace more beautiful than all the ones in the neighborhood." Her father used to smile at her innocence. They lived in a poor neighborhood, and the palace she spoke of was nothing like the luxurious mansions. To her, it was a home filled with laughter and gatherings, a house where the lights never went out, and where people passing by could feel its warmth. Some might think that physical pain is unbearable, but for Adele, that sketchbook was his true tormentor. Every time he turned its pages, it felt like another dagger piercing his heart. How could it not? She had drawn him as a strong hero, and had written beneath it in bold letters, "You are my hero." There were moments when he wished the roof would collapse on him, moments when he wished he could hide between the pages of that sketchbook forever. But fate never listened to his wishes. Even the half-filled glass of milk on the table reminded him of her. She used to laugh and say, "Half for me and half for Mom." And when he told her, "Sweetheart, may God provide for her in heaven, drink the rest," she would refuse, fire in her eyes, as she said, "Mom used to drink the rest of my milk and smile at me." I want to see her smile again. As he drowned in his memories, a voice called to him from outside. He moved to the window and looked out, his heart stopping for a moment. A school bus had pulled up in front of his house. He laughed so hard that tears streamed down his face. He danced like a child who had found his mother after being lost. At that moment, joy flooded every inch of his being, every part of his soul. Even the tiny heart trapped inside his chest seemed to leap with happiness, awaiting the bus door, which opened painfully, slowly, as if time itself wished to torment him, prolonging his agony. And finally, it opened. Noor ran toward him, arms wide open, her smile glowing like a butterfly flying toward him. He couldn't wait. He didn't take the stairs. He jumped out of the window like a madman, landing on his knees. He was lucky not to be injured, as the ground cushioned his fall. But that wasn't the embrace he wanted. He wanted hers. He wanted to hear her voice calling, "Papa!" He scrambled to his feet, but his heart refused to rise with him. He froze in place, unable to blink, as he realized the emptiness before him was just an illusion, just a memory playing itself over again in his mind. A heavy weight pressed on his chest. His breath became shallow. Darkness swallowed him whole, and the ground pulled him down until everything faded into nothingness. Then voices surrounded him, soft, frantic voices filled with both relief and fear. "He's waking up! He's waking up!" It felt like countless hands were trying to hold on to his soul before it drifted away. Light began to seep back into his vision, but the only thought in his mind was, "Will I have to live another day of this pain? No, let me go. I want to be with her." But his tongue was too heavy to speak. Then, a voice, one that anchored him back to life. It was his sister's voice. She was the only thing he had left in this cruel world, the only person who kept him from pulling the trigger on the gun he had once held. He couldn't leave her alone among the wolves. Gradually, he regained consciousness and whispered in a weak voice, "Where am I?" His sister, trembling with tears streaming down her face, replied, "You came back from the dead, my brother. Please don't leave me alone. You're all I have left. I beg you, let go of her. You almost killed me with you." Her words were enough to tether him to life once more. Day by day, he recovered. His sister, Noor, fed him with her own hands, never letting her smile fade. The house, once a place of mourning, began to fill with laughter again, until the doctor walked in with a warm smile and said, "You can go home now." Nurhan cheered, helping him up. But as they walked out, a familiar sight caught his attention. That cursed door, the one that had separated him from the greatest thing he had ever owned. Darkness crept back into his vision, as if fate whispered in his ear, "No, I won't let you forget." His sister's voice pulled him back. "Let's go. The car is waiting downstairs." He descended the stairs, each step feeling like a jump through time, dragging him through memories. Here, he brought her food. There, he gave her medicine. Over there, she laughed. And here, he wept. The weight of those memories made his head spin. He nearly collapsed, but his sister steadied him, asking, "Are you okay?" He forced a weak smile. "I'm okay, as long as I have you, my flower." He never wanted to see that terrified look in her eyes again. They got into the car and drove home. When he stepped inside, he found the window still open. He laughed, a bitter, sorrowful laugh, then lay down on his bed, the bed where he had lost his most precious treasure. He hugged the pillow and closed his eyes, imagining that it was her. But she wasn't there anymore, and she never would be. Noor had suffered from a heart condition, one with no cure. It wasn't a sudden death. It was slow, painful for both of them, as if fate had decided to punish them before finally taking her away. In her final days, he had seen the pain in her eyes. He had sat beside her, holding her tiny hand, begging fate to spare her. But fate neither listened nor cared. 1 week before she passed, he had woken up to find her awake beside him, staring at him with those wide, moon-like eyes, as if memorizing his face for the last time. "Papa, will you forget me if I go?" He froze, then forced a smile, despite the agony tearing him apart. "Never, Noor. You are my soul. How could I ever forget you? But I will be far away, and people forget those they can't see." Tears gathered in his eyes, but he stayed strong. "I won't forget you. I promise. I will see you everywhere." She shook her tiny head, unconvinced, then whispered, "If I leave, send me a letter every night. I will wait for it in the sky." He let out a choked laugh and said, "And how will I send it to you?" She smiled, stretched out her hand, and pointed to the stars. "Write it on paper and leave it beside my bed. The wind will carry it to me." He nodded in agreement, even though his heart was bleeding inside. He didn't know that this would be the last time he would see her awake. That night, Noor sat beside him, her small chest rising and falling like the waves of a stormy sea, each breath escaping her as if it were a cry for help no one could hear. She tried to speak, but the words seemed heavy, trapped between her ribs. She placed her tiny hand over his and whispered weakly, "Papa, tell me the story I love, the one you used to tell me before bed." He took a deep breath, trying to hide the tremble in his voice. He didn't know that the sleep she mentioned this time was of a different kind, but he began. There was once a father who had a little princess, the most beautiful thing in his life. They would go to the market together, buy ice cream, and laugh so much. But before he could finish, he felt her hand, the one that always held his so tightly, slowly loosen, as if she were saying goodbye without words. His heart pounded wildly, and he felt as if the entire world was shrinking around him. He grasped her small hand, feeling the cold creeping in gradually, as if life were slipping away from her, and he was powerless to stop it. He looked at her and found her eyes closed, a faint smile on her face, as if she were hearing the rest of the story in another world, as if she had finished it in the sky. "Noor?" She didn't answer. "Noor, my love, open your eyes." But she didn't. He waited for another breath, but it never came. The silence was heavy, merciless, as if time had frozen in that moment. He shook her gently, whispered her name, but her body remained still. Outside, the rain poured down heavily, striking the windows as if the sky was crying with him. The wind howled, mourning, and the dim light in the room seemed to bid her farewell too. His tears rained down onto her small hand, which still carried a fading warmth. He didn't know when he started screaming or when he collapsed onto her chest, trying to bring warmth back to her tiny body with his trembling hands. He shook her, called her name, but all he received in return was silence. He screamed her name as if trying to pull her back from the grasp of death, but Noor was already gone, and she had taken a part of him with her. It was the last time she would ever be. The days passed heavily, as if time had stopped at the moment of her departure, refusing to move forward. At first, he wrote to her every night, leaving the paper beside her empty bed. But in the morning, he would find it still there. The wind had not taken it, as she had promised. It had not reached the sky. With time, his voice grew weaker, as if the words could no longer find their way to the paper. One night, he sat on her bed, took a deep breath, and wrote his final letter. "Noor, I promised you I wouldn't forget you, and I haven't. But the pain has become stronger than me, my little one. I miss you more than my heart can bear. This is the last letter I will write because I can no longer live within these empty walls, stripped of everything that once had meaning. I couldn't build your castle, but you were my castle, and now you have become the dust. Just one thing. I will see you soon, my princess." He placed the letter beside her pillow, then closed his eyes. In the morning, when his sister entered the room to check on him, she found him there, lying on Noor's bed, holding the letter, his eyes closed just as hers had been that night. But on his lips, there was a small smile, as if he had finally found his way back to her, smiling together again. That's the end, or just the beginning.